Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin.
I shouldn't have gone to the damn party. That's the first thing I thought when I stepped onto the yacht. Underdressed and completely out of place among the sleek, high-dollar crowd. But Derek had insisted, family? Yeah, whatever. I knew what that meant. You're here to make me look good. I kept my head down, trying to blend into the background. My blouse was too plain, my shoes too sensible, and my jeans, well, they weren't designer. It didn't matter, though. I had to hold it together. But then Derek grabbed the mic, and that's when I knew things were going south. He introduced everyone, even our aunt's dog. But when he got to me, his smirk widened like he was about to deliver the punchline. "Everyone, my sister Tara," he said, loud and clear. You know, the one who tracks receipts and coupons for a living. A couple of people chuckled. A few more followed with nervous, polite laughter. But it didn't stop there. Derek's voice got louder, more dramatic. "She's an accountant. Can you believe that? Totally thrilling job. I swear, if I ever need someone to count the pennies, I know who to call." I felt the heat of 100 eyes on me. The sting was worse than I expected, like my skin was too thin to shield the embarrassment. I kept my smile glued on, but my teeth ground together so hard I thought they might crack. I didn't fight back. I never did. Not with Derek. Never had to. Because deep down, I was used to this. Used to being the joke. Used to being underestimated. But this was something else. The night dragged on after that. Derek flitted around like a peacock, showing off his latest tech deals and connections. Everyone adored him. No one even noticed me anymore. I was just the tag-along. When the party ended, I felt like I could finally breathe again. But my chest still ached. I'd gotten good at pretending his words didn't hurt. But that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was invisible. Beneath him. Nothing more than a joke to everyone. And that's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Derek's ignorance define me anymore. As I got into the car, I gripped the door handle tight. Enough, I thought. Enough. I wasn't his punchline. And I sure as hell wasn't going to be anyone's shadow. I didn't sleep much that night. Too many thoughts rattling around in my head, like the noise in the back of a train car that you can't escape. But I was up early the next morning, same as usual. I had a report to prep, and I didn't have time to dwell on Derek, his stupid joke, or any of the other crap that had eaten away at me the night before. I pulled on my worn-out jacket, grabbed my bag, and headed out. The sky was still half dark when I drove to the office, the city waking up around me. By the time I parked, I was already fully in work mode. The building was massive, one of those government monstrosities where everything feels like it's a mile away. Even walking through the front doors was a process. ID checks, security clearance, swiping my badge 3 times just to get into the elevator. This wasn't some corporate office building where people wore suits and smiled in the halls. No, this place had the sterile, cold air of something that had no time for nonsense. Once inside, I passed through layers of security, familiar faces who barely looked up at me, the hum of conversation and buzzing fluorescent lights in the background. I wasn't here to chat. The office was quiet when I sat down at my desk, the only sounds the clacking of keyboards and the occasional murmur from my team members. I opened my laptop, pulled up the briefing documents, and immediately got to work. The case was complicated. We were investigating a network of shell companies funneling millions through untraceable blockchain transactions. These were the kind of cases that got under your skin, the kind of financial crimes that were harder to catch because they didn't involve cash under a mattress or suitcases full of bills. This was a global web stretching across multiple countries, all wrapped up in a company based in Miami, the kind of place where the sun always shines and the money flows a little too freely. I clicked through the data, piecing together patterns, looking for discrepancies, connections, any sign of illegal activity. Then I saw it. One of the flagged companies, an investment firm tied to the Miami startup, had a connection to Cloudstone Corporation. The name hit me like a slap in the face. Cloudstone. That was Natalie's company, Derek's wife. I froze for a second. My heart did this weird skip, like when you've been driving too fast and your car hits a bump you didn't see coming. I clicked on the link again, double-checking, trying to breathe through it. But no matter how many times I looked at the numbers, the connections, the names, it was clear. There it was. I could feel the weight of it settling in my chest. I wasn't surprised. Not really. This kind of thing wasn't uncommon. People like Derek and Natalie, with their flashy businesses and high-end lives, they loved to pretend they were untouchable. But this case, It had my brother's fingerprints all over it. Still, I didn't react. I couldn't. Not yet. I kept my face neutral as I continued to sift through the details. The last thing I needed was to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't ignore the fact that I was staring at a potential link between their business dealings and illegal activity. The report I was compiling was about to get a lot more personal, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. I scrolled through the file again, making notes, organizing the data into something manageable. My mind kept drifting back to Derek's voice at that stupid party, mocking me, belittling me. And now I was staring at a mess that might blow up his life in a way he wouldn't be able to ignore. I leaned back in my chair, trying to shake off the feeling that I was both a bystander and an unwilling participant in whatever was about to happen. But for now, I said nothing. There were still too many pieces to this puzzle, and I wasn't about to jump into a situation like this without knowing exactly what I was dealing with. Not yet. 3 weeks later, I was sitting at my desk when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but when I saw the area code, I knew it was Derek. I hesitated for a second, then answered. Tara. His voice came through tight, panicked. You have to help me. Natalie, she's in trouble. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the familiar ache in my shoulders. What's going on? I asked, keeping my tone flat. They raided the house, he said, voice cracking. The feds. They showed up at 6 a.m., took everything. Computers, files, everything. They said it was a crypto investigation. They took Natalie in for questioning. I closed my eyes for a second. A small part of me felt nothing, like I was watching this from a distance, like it wasn't real. Wait, I said, cutting him off. The feds? What for? I don't know, he sputtered. They're saying she's involved in something. They're investigating her. His breath hitched. But it's all a misunderstanding, Tara. I'm telling you, she didn't do anything wrong. She's just a figurehead at Cloudstone. She doesn't know anything about what's going on. I know her. She'd never... I rubbed my forehead, feeling the tension in my skull, but I stayed calm. I don't work with the FBI, Derek, I said, slow and deliberate. I don't have the connections to help you. There was a beat of silence. Then Derek started talking faster, his words slurring together. Come on, Tara. You've got to know someone. Someone who can help her out. She's not the type to get involved in something illegal. She doesn't even know anything about this stuff. You know her, right? I exhaled through my nose, biting my tongue to keep from saying what I wanted to. It wasn't the time for, I told you so. But damn, it was hard to keep my mouth shut. Derek, I said, cutting him off again, I told you. I don't work with the FBI. I can't do anything for you. Please, Tara, he begged, his voice desperate now. This is bad. This is going to ruin us. It's going to ruin everything. The business, the house, everything. You have to help. I could almost see him pacing, the stress in his voice growing like a wave crashing against the shore. Look, I said, leaning forward, I'm not your savior, okay? And I'm not going to pretend I can fix this for you. Whatever's happening, it's beyond me. I can't help you with this. Derek didn't respond right away. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, finally, he whispered, I just don't know who else to turn to. I didn't feel sorry for him, but something about his vulnerability, his complete unraveling, was almost enough to make me feel something. Almost. I get it, Derek, I said, my voice soft but steady. But this is your problem now. I can't do anything. I'm sorry. The line went quiet again, and I could hear him breathing through his panic. I didn't feel the need to say anything more. I'll figure it out, he said, almost to himself. I'll fix this. Thanks, Tara. I didn't respond. I hung up before he could say anything else. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the phone. My hands were cold, but I didn't move. I already knew what Natalie was involved in. I knew exactly what this was about, even if Derek still couldn't see it. But I wasn't going to say anything. Not yet. This was his mess, not mine. Over the next few months, I watched it all fall apart. The first big headline hit 2 weeks after Derek's frantic call. Natalie was formally charged. The news stories started trickling in, one after another, detailing how Cloudstone had been implicated in a massive international crypto laundering scheme. I knew exactly what the reporters were talking about. It was the same network I'd been digging into for weeks, the one with the Miami startup. The stories spread like wildfire. Soon enough, they were linking Derek's company to the whole mess. The investors started pulling out one by one. Derek's name was everywhere, plastered across the business pages, alongside words like fraud, scandal, and investigation. I tried not to pay too much attention. I focused on my work, trying to ignore the flood of gossip and whispered conversations that seemed to follow me everywhere. At the office, people started giving me sidelong glances, like they were all trying to figure out whether I was secretly involved. It was awkward at first, but I didn't care. I had my own stuff to handle. But then, family started calling. My aunts, uncles, cousins. Every one of them had an opinion. They were suddenly so interested in me, in my career, in the fact that I actually had a job that mattered. For once, I wasn't the joke. You know, Tara, you always were the sensible one, Aunt Meg said during one of our phone calls. It's a shame about Derek, but at least you've got your feet planted firmly on the ground. I wanted to tell her that she was missing the point, that Derek wasn't the problem. It was the world he'd built, the image he'd crafted. His whole life was one big act. But I didn't. Instead, I just nodded along, playing the role they expected me to play. Derek kept calling too. I could feel his desperation through the phone. Tara, he'd say, voice thick with panic. You gotta help me. You know people. You can talk to someone, right? Maybe someone who could, I don't know, help smooth things over. Put in a good word with the right people. I'd listen, letting him ramble. He'd talk about how the company was falling apart, how the media was relentless, how investors were bailing out, leaving him with nothing. I never corrected him, never pointed out that I wasn't some kind of high-level fixer, or that my connections weren't going to save him. He thought I had some secret line to someone important, the Treasury Secretary, the FBI, God knows who else. He'd never bothered to ask me what I actually did for a living, and I wasn't about to tell him now. I don't have that kind of influence, Derek, I'd say. I'm not in a position to do anything like that. And every time he'd get frustrated, but I knew the words wouldn't sink in. Derek wasn't listening to me, not really. He was too busy trying to save his own skin. The weeks dragged on. Natalie was out on bail, but the damage had already been done. The charges against her stuck, and her trial loomed on the horizon. Derek's company was crumbling, and he was no longer the golden boy. And still, he called. I just need you to help me, Tara, he'd plead. You know how to make things happen. Can't you at least try? I'd stay calm, every time, polite but distant. I told you, Derek, I can't help you with this. He never seemed to grasp it. The longer the calls went on, the more absurd they became. He started asking about names, about people I might know who could intervene, like this was some game he could win if he had the right play. I didn't correct him, though. I didn't explain that I was no closer to the levers of power than he was, and I didn't tell him that I was quietly watching his empire implode from the sidelines. Every day, I sat at my desk, my mind half on the work in front of me and half on what was happening to him. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no glee. Just a cold, quiet understanding that this was always going to happen. Derek's world was built on the same flimsy foundation it always had been. It was just a matter of time before it cracked. And now, as his life unraveled, I couldn't help but feel, maybe for the first time, that I was finally standing on solid ground. I wasn't the one who needed saving. It was a few weeks after Natalie's sentencing when Derek called again. I saw his name on my screen and hesitated for a second. I could already hear the panic in his voice, even before I answered. Tara, he said, and I could feel the weight in his voice. I don't know what to do anymore. We're losing everything. I might have to sell the house. All the contracts are falling through, and they pulled me from the events. The board doesn't want anything to do with me. I didn't say anything. Just let him keep talking, his words spilling out faster as the desperation crept in. Everything's going under. I thought I could fix it, but it's over. I'm just done. He sighed, the sound so heavy I could almost feel it. And you've got that nice, cozy desk job, right? I guess it must be nice to be so stable. I could hear the subtle dig in his tone, the way he thought that maybe, just maybe, he could still make me feel small, like he always had. And it was the last straw. I didn't even let myself take a breath. I just snapped. That cozy desk job is the reason you're still calling me, Derek, I said, my voice colder than I meant it to be, but it was too late to pull it back now. It's the reason I have a life that works, and you don't. There was a pause on the other end, but I didn't give him a chance to respond. I had all of it. Years of waiting, of biting my tongue, of letting him talk down to me, piled up in that one moment, and I wasn't going to hold back anymore. I run a multi-agency investigative team, I continued, each word cutting through the air like it had weight behind it. I lead high-stakes cases, multi-million-dollar financial crime investigations that cross international borders. I work with the Treasury Department. I report directly to the Secretary of the Treasury. That's what I do for a living. That's what I've been doing for years. I could hear him on the other end, stunned into silence. It was like the whole world stopped for a second, and I let that sink in. I never told you because I didn't want you to look at me like I was just the boring accountant you made fun of for so long. I could feel my pulse in my throat, but I kept my voice steady. I never wanted to be like you, Derek. I never wanted to play your game, never wanted to be part of your world where everything's built on bullshit and smoke and mirrors. There was another long silence. This time, I wasn't waiting for him to say anything. I wasn't trying to fix anything or make him feel better. It was too late for that. I've worked my ass off to get where I am, I said, my voice almost a whisper, but it carried all the same. I didn't have the luxury of riding on the coattails of some startup that might blow up, and I'm not going to let you keep throwing your mess at me, expecting me to clean it up. I paused, letting my words hang in the air. I knew Derek. I knew his ego. I knew how he'd always assumed I was beneath him, never once considering that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't. I'm done, Derek, I said, my voice final. You're going to have to figure this out yourself. I'm not your backup anymore. Another long silence stretched out, but this time, it didn't feel awkward. It felt like the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I didn't need to hear his response. I didn't need him to say anything. The silence was enough. Finally, I heard him mutter something, probably a string of apologies or attempts at manipulation, but I wasn't listening anymore. Goodbye, Derek, I said, cutting him off, and before he could say anything else, I ended the call. I sat there for a minute, staring at the phone, a strange calmness washing over me. It wasn't relief, it was just finality. I didn't need to play this game anymore. I didn't owe him anything. And for once, I wasn't looking back. It had been months, not a single word from Derek. Not that I expected one. After the call, I thought maybe he'd try again, or at least send a half-hearted message of apology. But nothing. Not a peep. The silence was odd. At first, it was uncomfortable, like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. But as the weeks stretched into months, I found it almost peaceful. I didn't realize how much his jabs and digs had been clouding my head until they stopped. Without his voice nagging at the back of my mind, the space around me felt quieter, cleaner. For the first time in a long time, I could just breathe. I threw myself into work, the way I always did when I needed to fill a void. My department had no shortage of projects, new cases, new investigations, new challenges. Financial crimes never stopped. And the truth was, I liked it that way. It kept me busy. It kept me sharp. Then one morning, while I was sipping coffee and skimming through my emails, my phone buzzed with a message from Aunt Meg. She had been one of the first to reach out after everything exploded. Tara, honey, I was talking to Derek last night. He's really trying to rebuild. He asked about you, said he's trying to make amends. Maybe you could give him a call. I stared at the message for a moment, then set the phone down without replying. I had no desire to revisit any of that. Derek could try all he wanted, but it wasn't my job to pick up the pieces of his broken world. I kept scrolling through my work emails, but the message stayed on my mind, nagging at me. Rebuild. What did that even mean? It wasn't like I was going to help him. As if on cue, a news alert pinged on my laptop, pulling me out of my thoughts. Another update about Natalie. This time, she was testifying in federal court. The headlines were filled with words like cooperation and sentencing. A part of me wondered how much of her testimony was truth and how much was just her trying to save whatever she could of her life. I clicked the article open and skimmed through it, my eyes scanning the details of her plea agreement. The whole thing made my stomach twist, but I pushed it down. I wasn't going to feel bad for Natalie, not after everything that happened. She wasn't innocent, neither was Derek. I closed the article, and for a moment, I sat there, just staring at my screen. Then I stood up and walked over to the stack of files on my desk. There were bigger cases on my plate than Derek's mess, more important things to focus on. I didn't need to keep looking back. The silence was a gift, and I was done with that chapter of my life. I pushed the phone out of my mind and dove back into my work, the endless sea of spreadsheets and reports. I had a team that relied on me. I had a job that mattered. Derek, Natalie, all of it. It was just noise now, and I was finally, truly free of it. It had been a few weeks since the last time I'd heard from Derek, and I was starting to think maybe he'd finally gotten the message. Then, out of nowhere, I got a text. Tara, hope you're doing well. I know it's been a while, but I was wondering if you'd want to grab coffee after Mom's birthday dinner. I get it if you don't, but thought I'd ask. I stared at it for a good 5 minutes before I even responded. Coffee, after everything that had happened. Was he serious? But then I thought about it. Mom's birthday was always a family event, and maybe this was his way of trying to patch things up, at least a little. I hesitated, then typed back, fine, but it'll be brief. The day of Mom's birthday came and went without much fanfare. We all gathered at her place, shared some cake, and exchanged the usual awkward small talk. Derek was there, but it wasn't the same. He was quieter, thinner somehow, like the weight of everything was bearing down on him more than it had before. After the party, we met at a little cafe downtown. Derek was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, nursing a coffee that had long gone cold. His eyes flicked up when I walked in, and for a second I could see the old Derek, the cocky, too cool for anything guy who thought the world owed him something. But it faded quickly, replaced by something I couldn't quite place. He stood when I sat down, like we were doing this dance of civility, and there was a nervousness in his movements I hadn't expected. Thanks for coming, he said, shifting in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. I know it's been a lot, but I wanted to talk. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't want to make this any easier for him. He'd had plenty of chances to talk before, and he hadn't, so I just waited. I've been thinking, he continued, his voice low, almost too quiet. About everything, about you mostly. He paused like he was choosing his words carefully. I was wrong. I never really understood what you did, or how serious it was. I thought you were just, well, I don't know, boring. He gave a half-hearted laugh, but there was no humor in it. But I see it now. I see how much work you put into it, how real it is, how smart you are. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. I didn't know what to say. His words felt like they were slipping through my fingers, like he was just trying to fix what couldn't be fixed with a few sentences. I felt threatened, Tara, he went on, staring at his hands. You've always been so, together, and I always thought I had to be the one with the answers. But the truth is, I didn't know how much you were carrying. I raised an eyebrow at that. He didn't get it. Not really. He didn't understand that I wasn't carrying anything for him, that I had my own life, my own responsibilities. He wasn't entitled to any part of it. Still, there was something different in his voice, a kind of vulnerability I wasn't used to hearing from him. It was like he finally saw me, not as the girl who hung around in his shadow, but as someone with her own life. I didn't forgive him. I didn't think I could. Not yet. Not after everything. You were a jerk, I said flatly. You made it harder than it needed to be. I didn't deserve the way you treated me. Derek nodded, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't try to defend himself. He just accepted it. I know. We sat there in silence for a while, both of us lost in our own thoughts. The noise of the cafe seemed to fade around us. I wasn't ready to forgive him, but I was willing to listen. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't the person I had to fight against. He was just someone trying to put things right. I don't know if we can go back to the way things were, I said quietly, the words feeling heavier than I expected. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Derek. But I'll listen. If you want to talk, I'm not going to shut you out. He looked at me then, like he was still unsure how to respond. But there was something real in his eyes. No more jokes, no more pretending, just him. Okay, he said finally, voice soft. I get it. We sat there a little longer, and I let myself breathe. Maybe it wasn't forgiveness. Maybe it was just two people who'd spent years drifting apart, learning how to stay in the same room without wanting to tear each other down. It wasn't a fix, but it was a start. It was a few months later when I saw Derek again. I'd gone to a retirement ceremony for one of my mentors, someone who'd helped me get to where I was, and I was sitting in the front row, listening to the speeches, watching him say his goodbyes to the team. I wasn't expecting to see Derek there, but halfway through the event, I spotted him sitting in the back row, his face a little too tense, his shoulders a little too stiff. He didn't belong. He looked different, older, thinner, quieter. The old Derek, the one who used to charm his way into every room, was gone. But there was still something familiar in the way he looked at the people around him, like he didn't quite know how to fit in. After the ceremony ended, I stood to leave, and that's when I saw him moving toward me. He caught my eye, and for a moment we just stared at each other, both of us trying to figure out what this was. Then he walked over, hesitated for a second, and finally spoke. I had no idea. I frowned. What? This place, he said, glancing around the high security building we were in. I didn't know it was like this. I didn't know you were involved in all this. I blinked, confused for a moment, and then it clicked. He meant my job, the multi-agency team, the cases, everything I'd kept from him. I thought you were just an accountant, he said, his voice quieter now. But it's huge, Tara. I had no idea. I didn't say anything at first. It wasn't that I was angry. I was just tired of talking about it. But Derek seemed genuinely overwhelmed. It was like he was seeing my world for the first time. And for once, I wasn't the one explaining myself to him. He was trying to understand it on his own. I want to see it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I want to see what you do. I wasn't sure why I agreed to show him around. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was because this was the first time he'd asked about my life in a real way. Whatever the reason, I led him through the public areas of the building, the halls lined with framed awards, the buzzing of computers in the background. We passed through a few rooms, and Derek stayed close behind me, his eyes darting from one thing to the next. He didn't say much, just watched, taking it all in. I showed him the main workspaces, the open plan areas where my team sat, their focus intense as they dug through data, piecing together the next financial crime case. Derek didn't say anything for a long time, but I could feel his eyes on me, like he was seeing me in a way he never had before. You're in charge here, he finally asked, his voice barely audible. I nodded. I run the investigations. I oversee everything, from the early stages to the final report. I make sure the team's hitting their marks. He swallowed, his gaze flicking back to the people working, their concentration unwavering. You're doing this. All of this. And I had no idea. I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to tell him everything I'd been through to get here, the obstacles I'd faced, the long nights, the sacrifices. But what good would it do? It wasn't for him to understand anymore. He looked around again, his face pale like he couldn't quite grasp the enormity of it all. Finally, he spoke again, quieter this time, almost like he was talking to himself. I can't believe I thought you were just, stuck in a boring office job. I turned to face him, feeling the weight of the years that had passed between us. You never really wanted to know, Derek. You never asked. You were too busy pretending you had all the answers. His eyes softened for a moment, but he didn't argue. Instead, he just nodded, a quiet kind of acknowledgement hanging between us. As we reached the end of the hallway, Derek stopped and turned toward me, his expression serious now. I hope you know. I'm proud of you, Tara. I really am. I didn't get it before, but I see it now. What you've built. Who you are. I nodded, but it felt like too much, too soon. The past was still too heavy for me to just drop it and move on. I'm thinking about it, I said finally, my voice low. That's all I can offer you right now. Derek didn't push. He just stood there for a moment like he was waiting for something. But when nothing else came, he gave a short nod. I get it, he said quietly. Thanks for showing me, Tara. I won't forget this. I watched him turn and walk away, the space between us growing again. As I stood there, I realized that even though he'd taken the first step, there was still a long way to go. But for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel impossible. Maybe, just maybe, there was room for a new beginning. A year later, I found a letter in my mailbox, tucked among the usual bills and junk mail. It was handwritten, the kind of thing you don't see much anymore. My first thought was that it was some kind of mistake, but then I saw the familiar scrawl. Derek. I stood there for a second, staring at it. My heart didn't race. It didn't even skip. I just felt tired. Maybe I wasn't as surprised as I should have been. I opened the envelope slowly and unfolded the paper inside. His handwriting was messy, like he wasn't sure how to say what he needed to. Tara, I understand if we never speak again, or if we never reconnect. I'm not asking for forgiveness, and I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I see you now, the person you've become, and I'm proud of you. I was wrong. I'm sorry it took me this long to figure that out. If you ever want to talk, I'm here, but I know I don't deserve that. Derek, I folded the letter carefully, as if the paper might crumble under the weight of it. I set it down on my desk, but I didn't know what to do with it. Part of me wanted to call him, to respond somehow, but the other part of me knew I didn't need to. It wasn't about needing closure anymore. It wasn't about mending anything. It was just done. I wasn't the same person who used to bend over backward to get him to see me. I had nothing left to prove. Instead of calling him, I put the letter in the drawer. Maybe I'd read it again later. Maybe I wouldn't. Either way, it didn't matter. The next morning, I flew out for an international summit on financial compliance. I was sitting with my team at the hotel, waiting for the conference to begin, when one of my colleagues, Maya, casually asked, "So, how's your family?" "Everything good with your brother." I smiled faintly, something that barely touched my eyes. "Complicated." Maya raised an eyebrow, but I didn't offer more. What was there to say? The world was so much bigger than Derek's mess, so much more important. I was no longer trapped in his shadow, no longer trying to manage his expectations. For the first time in my life, I felt light. There was no need for me to explain myself, no need to carry any of that baggage around anymore. Derek could keep his apology. I'd carry on. I turned back to the presentation slides on my screen, pushing the letter out of my mind. Whatever happened next, whether Derek and I ever spoke again or not, didn't matter. What mattered was that I was finally free.